today. The first speaker is Victoria Tolpegina from the she's international project manager at Rosfoto. Rosfoto is a Russian state museum and exhibition center for photography. Victoria is responsible for the international communications and coordinating of international projects. This means exhibitions, research and educational activities. The last 5 years she has been working within the field of international cultural and educational projects. Victoria, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Tamara. So hello everyone who has still the power to stay here and to listen some stories about museums. So thank you so much, Carolina and all the organizers team for inviting us here. That's such a wonderful opportunity to be. And I would like to start my presentation of our Center of Photography. We are a relatively young and small museum institution, so it's very interesting for me to be here as well, and I'm learning quite much from you. Okay, so during this presentation I will go briefly through the history of Rosfoto, how for us it's to be a museum of photography, today about our exhibitional research activities, and of course maybe the most interesting part, the collection. Well, to start with, Russian State Museum and Exhibition Center for Photography is one of the unique and maybe largest national expertise center of photography in Russia. It was founded only in 2002 by the Ministry of Culture of the Russian Federation, firstly with the name the National Center of Photography. And in 2005, it moved to a very interesting historic building of the 19th century. Oops, sorry. Yep, it's here in this slide. Which used to belong to an insurance company, Russia, located on Bolshaya Morskaya Street, right next to St. Isaac Cathedral. And the first specialized photography bookstore in Russia was opened at Rosfoto in 2008. Well, the rationale about bringing an institute for photography in St. Petersburg is quite clear. Unfortunately, the Soviet legacy was quite a heavy burden upon different museums in Russia, and the photographic collections, which actually comprise maybe 1/3 of the museum funds of the Russian Federation, were not at the best of the handling situation. So, of course, the mission of Rosfoto became to develop the photographic collections, to improve the handling of this photographic heritage, and of course the knowledge of museum specialists in Russia. And also it is quite symbolic actually to start a photography institution in St. Petersburg, because I don't know if you know that, but not only that St. Petersburg is, well, some say it's the cultural capital of Russia, whether Moscow is probably taking over in points of modern arts, but still, St. Petersburg is the place where the first photographic exhibition was held, and also the first studios of photographers were there. For example, of Giovanni Bianchi or William Carrick, or of course our most famous photographer Sergei Levitsky, or Karl Bulla as well. Throughout its history, Rosfoto maintained its major dimensions of activities, exhibition, research, and education, all of them very closely interrelated. Well, not to be mentioned, Rosfoto is expanding its network of international partnerships, and we play a very active part in developing cultural relations, cultural exchanges, and bilateral years of culture programs, for example. Now this year we have Russia-Netherlands Year of Cooperation, and we're very happy to collaborate with our very nice partner, Netherlands Photo Museum. And so, to proceed further on about the exhibition. Generally in Rosfoto we have 3 exhibition spaces, 2 scientific labs, photographic lab, printing venue, and a bookstore. Also, I must say we face a shortage of exhibition spaces, and that is why probably we don't have yet a permanent exhibition on display, but we are thinking about that, and maybe we are even planning some virtual project. So I would very much like some recommendations about that if anybody has it. In terms of exhibitions, we exhibit works of well-known national and international masters of photography, as well as young talented artists working in different genres, and also related arts as video art, experimental cinema, animation. Over the last few years, we've had some very interesting exhibitions by Sergei Falin, Boris Mikhalovkin, both Russian, Joachim Smish, Susanne Winterling, Germany, and well, so on. With approximately 50 exhibitions a year, many of our projects are developed in cooperation with also international funds, such as Goethe Institute, for example, Mondrian Foundation, the Netherlands, Nordic Cultural Foundation, and others. And yes, 50, I do understand that's maybe quite an immense figure, but it is the truth. I'm very serious. So those exhibitions happen at Rosfoto in some our partnership organizations, and also they travel widely in Russia and abroad. And so we are expanding the geography of the project, looking very closely to different museums from Nizhny Novgorod to Irkutsk. And also, of course, they are accompanied with a program of lectures, art meetings, and so on. Well, this is probably going to change, and maybe we would like to, of course, diminish the number of the exhibitions, and focus more on educational side of the exhibition activities to strive for better photography understanding in Russia, and also better representation of Russian photographic heritage abroad. And here I have examples of two catalogs that we published at Rosfoto. This is the catalog of the photographs from private collectors from Moscow, regarding Moscow and St. Petersburg. And another one by William Carrick, that I have already mentioned, a very interesting photographer, Scottish by origin, who came to St. Petersburg and founded here one of the first photography studios in Russia. And his works of the so-called scenes of Russian life are very interesting to look at. So those both catalogs go to Carolina. So if anybody's interested, welcome to contact her about that. Okay. Oops. So to move on to the research activities, firstly, of course, we have an educational program, theoretical and practical courses about photography, guided tours, children activities, and so on. Also, moving to research, as I mentioned, Rosfoto is a very important competence center on the national level for all the museums in all the aspects related to photography, from storage technologies to conservation and restoration. So it all play a grand role in our activities. Both laboratories are used very widely, and we are very proud to have well-educated specialists there. And we develop our own technologies and help other museums finding solutions for the storage. And the important thing is that in 2008, Rosfoto has been appointed by the Ministry of Culture, such a national research center, to carry out so-called National Program for Preservation of Photographic Documents. This involves monitoring of the collections in Russia, as I said, helping or consulting our other museums on all the aspects to photography, and also developing national policy standards on all of these aspects related to photographic collections handling. And during these activities, Rosfoto accumulates a very interesting information about photographic collections in Russia, and it is the case, unfortunately, that in some of the museums the situation is so that still some items need extensive research. They are not properly attributed to and not properly handled. And that's, I guess, is important to talk to about. And therefore, we have an interesting projects ongoing, including we are preparing a publication about daguerreotypes in Russian museum collections. We have 2 annual conferences, Photography in the Museum and Expertise in Photography. all those bringing the issues. So, the collection part. We are now getting to 2,000 items, and for us being only 12 years old, it's probably quite a lot. So we have been able to create a very amazing collection of original works from portrait daguerreotypes of 1840s to modern time prints. And of course, the collection is aimed to represent important visual culture heritage of Russia and other countries, most focus on Russia. The collection items are diverse on thematic genre, chronological coverage, and techniques. They are related to Russian history and culture, also enabling us to demonstrate the historical development of Russian photography, or light painting as it was called before, with the advance of techniques of photography in Russia. The collection is being formed through public-funded acquisitions, which is currently prevailing, and some private donations. On expanding its collection, Rosphoto is trying to hold the focus on rare techniques and also making the acquisitions or accepting donations. We follow the principle common probably for most of the museums of Russia. We take into account not only the documental value, but of course the main issue is the artistic value. And of course the other items need further research, which we happily do furthermore. And some valuable series include landscape photography of the 19th, 20th century, war periods, like Russian-Japanese War, both world wars, the portraits by famous Russian light painters, Sergei Levitsky, as I mentioned, architecture and ethnographic collections of different periods, especially interesting of those 19th, 20th century. Then different albums, and family albums including, and works also connected to St. Petersburg. Here you can see one of our recently donated works, photogravure etching by Peter Miller, American-Japanese artist. And I would like to show to you some of the examples of the works that we have in our collections. That is Crimea, of Caucasus region, oops. The one dedicated to the expedition on the icebreaker Georgy Sidov. Views of St. Petersburg. Also the one mentioned, the studio of Karl Bulla, the artist, German by origin, also who came to St. Petersburg and started his studio that was very successful and is still actually existing. Boris Kudayarov is his famous blockage series. And I would like to move on to our recent, do we still have time, Tamara? Okay. Excuse me. To our recent acquisitions, Russian pictorialist photography and Soviet photography. Okay, to start with pictorialist photography, we have now a considerable collections of those. And this movement first became known in Europe, and then, oh, thanks a lot. Got a second wind in Russia in 20s and 30s. And it was brought by British, French, and German magazines, by Russian photographers who attended European exhibitions and competitions. And Russian artists were so much appreciated in Europe, but not really in Russia. Unfortunately, they had to come into conflict with the already Soviet authorities, and finally we were deprived of the right to work. But eventually their heritage got to be appreciated, and it was important that Rosphoto acquired such a large representation of those work. And here you can see the examples of the work by Grinberg, Rambach, Andreev, Ivanov, Aleluev, and some other very international masters, including the modern one, Lyudmila Tobolina. And to move on also by the current project, Soviet photography, the return of the Soviet photography collection was made possible through the grant of the Ministry of Culture. It was acquired from the private United States archive. And the content of this exhibition largely repeats material of the first volume of well-known edition, Anthology of the Soviet Photography by Lilia Ukhtomskaya, printed in 1986 in Moscow by Planet Editorial House. The anthology was defined by its authors as short history of development of art photography in the context of the building of socialism. This definition is also applicable to the exhibition project as well. The selection of photographs is on the one hand a sequence of well-known official photographic works traditionally associated with the notion of Soviet photography, while on the other hand representing a number of outstanding artworks of the time made by the talented artists. This ambiguity is characteristic to art of the Soviet period, when dividing between the official and underground was fundamental to comprehension of artwork by its contemporaries. And the project comprised mainly of authorial prints by famous Soviet photographers: Georgy Zelma's images from Birth of Iskra and Village Komsomol Women series, Arkady Shakhet's Sports Parade, Boris Ignatovich Dynamo, and first structure, Immanuel Yevzerikhin's Mausoleum in Winter, Olga Lander's Electrification of Rostov-Lvovsk Road, and so on. So this was mostly my presentation, and I would like to thank you again all for the attention. If anyone has questions or project activities, please write to us. We would like to consider that. Thank you.